Very much. I want to go to Virginia's Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears. Lieutenant Governor, very good to have you. I know there were protests outside at least a couple of justices' homes last night, but particularly in your neck of the woods in Virginia, Judge Clarence Thomas's home. What measures are being taken to keep those justices who reside in your state safe?
Well, I have spoken with the governor, and one of the things that I wanted to know was why couldn't we put a blockade at their homes, you know, right at the streets, and he let me know that as governor he didn't have that authority, but the local government has that authority, and they refused to do so. And our attorney general couldn't do some of those things either because he doesn't have the authority. He would be disbarred. So we're actually a nation of laws, a state of laws, and so we're expecting the local government to help. Now, where Justice Clarence Thomas lives, it is a private street, so he can block there. But look, this is about protecting the innocent. It's always about that. That is the role of government, if it's not anything else. And so we have to ensure that we protect the lives of the elderly. We don't say, no, they've lived all the good years and it's time for them to move on. And so we pull the plug, and we don't do it for children who are born with disabilities. No, we protect them. Every life is important. And so that's what this is about. And I don't want it to go down in history that I, as a lieutenant governor, did not protect the lives of the unborn.
Having said that, then, Governor Youngkin has said that, he's looking at an abortion law that would stop abortions at 15 weeks, more than 15 weeks. He's talking as well with a number of Republicans, anti-abortionists, all who, in order to maybe get more votes for that, Lieutenant Governor, he might bring it up to 20 weeks. Can you tell us where that stands?
Well, we're not, back in session yet. That will be when we come back in January. We'll be back in September, but I don't think we're going to be deciding any of that in September. So it'll be January. So the legislation is being crafted right now at the 15-week mark. And by the way, currently, Virginia, the abortion, you can have up to 25 weeks. Folks, in China, they limit it to 24 weeks. China. In fact, in Spain, I believe it's 14 weeks. So, we are more liberal in Virginia than some of the European countries and even China. And so we are going to try our very best, because let's think about what's happening at 15 weeks. The baby is starting to suck in the womb. The baby is starting to do turmoils and all of those things in the womb. At the bottom of this, what is the mother having? It's not a lizard. It is a baby. She's having a human baby. And the Democrats went too far so many years, 2-3 years ago, when Delegate Kathy Tran here in Virginia proposed legislation, law, that you can have the baby up until the time that the baby is supposed to be born and have that abortion, up until that time. And then we had Governor Northam, at that time Virginia's governor, a pediatrician, folks, a pediatrician who said that, yes, you can have the baby after the abortion, and we'll resuscitate the infant, we'll keep the infant comfortable until the mother decides what to do. Heavens, man, what are you talking about? The baby is already here. What kind of a society would we be if the baby is on the abortion table struggling for life and we turn aside? No, we're not going to do that. We're going to protect the innocent. And so that's one more reason why we won here in Virginia.
I understand. And you're quite right. I mean, there are far stricter abortion standards abroad. In fact, France won't allow abortions after 16 weeks, Spain 14 weeks, Argentina 14 weeks, Finland 12, Italy 12, Ukraine 12, Russia 12. So you raise a very good point, Governor. I did want to explore some of these other states that are already implementing so-called trigger anti-abortion laws. In the case of Texas and some others that outlaw it from the point of fertilization, conception, more or less. How do you feel about those efforts?
Well, I have no authority in those states. I was elected in Virginia. The people in those states will make that decision. But I want people to understand this. Ostensibly, what the Democrats try to do is to use the problems and the historical grievances that black people have faced to advance their nefarious agenda. It is a nefarious agenda. But look at what has happened ever since Roe. Well, I'm going to look at some statistics here. In Virginia, the black population is 19 to 20%. 2019, 15,000 plus abortions were done. 46% of them were done by black women. Now, if the KKK had said we will pay for every black woman to have an abortion who wants one, we would say to ourselves, wait a minute, something's up. Why don't they want us to have our babies? But you see that we don't understand what's going on, and so we're losing so many black lives that matter. So, folks, we've got to understand. We've got to understand. We need to protect the innocent. We need to protect the babies in the womb, no matter what race, no matter what color, no matter anything. There are some European countries, you did name some countries that are less lenient than we are with the abortion time limit. But there are some European nations that there aren't even born babies who have Down syndrome. Think about that. There are people in America who have Down syndrome. If they lived in some of these European countries, they would never have been born. The thing is, if we don't protect the innocent, one day it will be our turn. If you can't count on your government to protect the innocent, you will be next. One thing we learned from history is we don't learn from history, and unfortunately, it seems we're condemned to repeat our mistakes over and over again.
So very quickly, Lieutenant Governor, I appreciate your being here. Mike Pence has said there ought to be a law against abortions, period. That would be the next step. How do you feel about that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that part. There is a law.
Mike Pence wants a law to outlaw abortions, period.
No, I think what we need to do is to at least ensure the life and the health of the mother. I can't ask a woman to sacrifice her life. Example, if she has cancer and she needs treatment, and maybe that treatment will result in the death of her child, I can't ask her to choose between her life and the life of the child at that point.
All right.
That necessarily is a difference. So I believe also, in terms of rape and incest, but certainly, most of these abortions, it's not rape, it's not incest. We're giving our children to the God of my career. We're giving our children to the God of I can't afford this baby. We're giving our children to the God of it's not the right time yet, or I'm too old for this. Whatever God you choose, and I know that, really, no matter what religion you have, at some point you know in your heart that this is a baby in the womb, and the baby in the womb wants to live.
All right, Governor, thank you very much for taking the time. Lieutenant Governor of the beautiful state of Virginia, Winsome Sears. Thank you again.